My heart wasn't just beating in my chest that night, it was trying to escape, a frantic, caged bird battering against my ribs. 45 minutes I waited, wrapped in a cloak that smelled of dust and despair, tucked into the shadow of the servants' stairwell. My maid Sophia had stolen it for me, a final act of loyalty. The heavy wool scratched my neck, but it was perfect, anonymous. It made me a ghost in my own home. Underneath, I wore the plainest dress I owned, the color of mud and ashes. No one would look twice at a woman in such a dress scurrying through the lower city at this hour. But they would look at the contents of the satchel strapped beneath my cloak. My hands were clamped over it, protecting the only life I had left. Every gold coin, every hidden piece of jewelry my mother had whispered was my just in case. My father called it my dowry. I called it my ransom. It was the price of my disappearance. The estate clock groaned as it struck the quarter hour. The sound echoed through the silent western corridor, a death knell. Time. I moved, a silent shadow. My feet knew every whispering floorboard, every stone that sighed under pressure. This house had been my gilded cage for 22 years, and I had mapped its every flaw in my dreams of leaving. The air smelled of beeswax and old money, but tonight it smelled like fear. Tomorrow, my father, Lord Heiress of House Lowell, would present me at the Autumn Conclave, a gathering of every noble house and pack leader in the realm, a marketplace of flesh and power. I was to stand there, the prized heiress of a waning house, and accept the suit of Lord Balthazar, a man 3 times my age with eyes like cold flint and a grip that left bruises. My father's strategic alliance, my life sentence. Unless I wasn't there. 200 paces down the cold, forgotten tunnel behind the wine cellar. My breath fogged in the air, each gasp loud in the dripping dark. 300 more to the iron grate that opened into the stinking alley behind the brimstone bazaar. My heart hammered a frantic, hopeful rhythm. Elias would be there, my Elias, with his kind eyes and promises of a simple life beyond the mountains, in the free towns, where names like Lowell meant nothing. We would take his waiting horses and vanish into the dawn. We would build a life chosen by us, not bargained for us. The grate creaked open under my trembling hands. I emerged into the alley, the reek of the city hitting me like a wall, rotten fruit, stale beer, and smoke. The bazaar sprawled before me, a riot of torchlight and noise even at this hour. I pulled my hood lower and melted into the crowd, a shiver of excitement cutting through my fear. I was almost free. The Gilded Cup Tavern was where he said he'd be. Its windows glowed with warm, buttery light, spilling laughter and fiddle music into the street. My hand reached for the heavy door handle, my pulse singing with anticipation. And then I heard his voice, Elias's voice, so familiar it was a second heartbeat. It came from the narrow, dark passage beside the tavern. Relief, sweet and dizzying, washed over me. He was here. He'd come. Everything was going to be... Once the money's in my hand, I'm gone, his voice carried, laced with a laugh I didn't recognize. It was cold, cynical. Let Lord Heiress hunt for his runaway daughter, not my problem. My world didn't just stop, it shattered. The pieces hung in the air around me, sharp and glittering and deadly. A sob ripped from my throat. I looked up, tears blurring my vision, and met a pair of eyes that glowed like molten amber in the torchlight. Not a trick of the flame. They held their own light, ancient and fierce. The stranger looked down at me, not at the fortune spilled at his feet. He simply saw me, saw the devastation. He didn't speak, didn't move to help or to steal. He just waited. And in that suspended moment, Elara Lowell, daughter of a fading house, trained to be a political ornament, did the most insane, the most desperate thing she had ever done. My voice was a raw, broken thing. I need a husband by tomorrow. The words hung between us, absurd and tragic. I clutched the empty satchel like a lifeline. Someone to stand beside me at the Autumn Conclave to make them believe I am chosen, protected, unavailable. I'll pay you. Everything that's here. It's all I have. The stranger's gaze finally left my face, flicking to the scattered gold, then back to my eyes, tracing the tears I could no longer hold back. The silence stretched, thin and terrifying. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, a vibration I felt in my bones. It wasn't gentle, it was certain. You don't need a husband, you need a shield. And somehow, in the ruins of my world, I believed him.
He didn't laugh. He didn't walk away. He simply crouched, with a predator's grace, and began to gather my shattered life from the cobblestones. His hands were large, scarred, but his movements were precise, almost reverent. He didn't rush, as if the chaos of the bazaar and the fragility of the girl before him were the only things that mattered. When he placed the last diamond-studded bracelet into the satchel and pressed it back into my trembling hands, his fingers brushed mine. They were warm, steady, an anchor in my spiraling dread. "Why a husband?" he asked, his amber eyes holding mine. Not, "Who are you?" or "What trouble are you in?" Just, "Why?" The truth felt too heavy, too humiliating. "The Autumn Conclave," I whispered, the words scraping my throat. "Tomorrow night, my father, I am expected to finalize an alliance, a marriage. If I arrive alone or with no arrangement, my house will be seen as weak, exposed. It will be a feeding frenzy." He studied me and I felt laid bare. "And the man you were running to?" A fresh wave of pain, sharp and acidic. "Was part of the trap," I said, the admission chilling me. "No," he said, the word firm. "You were trusting. There's a difference." He stood, extending a hand to help me up. I took it, his strength pulling me to my feet effortlessly. "I will do this on 2 conditions." My heart, so recently broken, gave a treacherous, hopeful thud. "What conditions?" "First, from this moment, you tell me the complete truth. No half-stories, no noble omissions. If I ask, you answer." I swallowed hard and nodded. "Second," his gaze intensified and the air around us seemed to still. "You trust that my purpose is to protect you, not just from your father or this conclave, but from anything that would cause you harm." It should have sounded like arrogance. From any other man it would have. But from him, in the dim alley with my gold in his hand and my tears on my face, it sounded like the most solid vow I had ever heard. "I don't even know your name," I breathed. Something shifted in his expression, a shadow passing behind his eyes. "You will," he said, "when it matters." He guided me away from the gilded cup, away from the ghost of Elias's laughter. We moved through the thinning market crowd like 2 shades, my dark cloak blending with his simple dark attire. He led me not deeper into the city, but toward its outskirts, where the grand houses gave way to workshops, then to the worn-down buildings that leaned against the city's great wall. "Where are we going?" I asked, my soft-soled boots already aching on the rough stones. "To somewhere you can breathe," he said, his voice low, "and where we can talk without 100 ears listening." We turned down a deserted lane, the tall buildings casting us in deep shadow. That's when they appeared. 3 men stepped from a doorway, blocking our path. They wore the gray tunics of the city wardens, but their eyes were hungry, their smiles cruel. The leader, a man with a broken nose, leered at me. "Well now, what's a fine little dove doing out so late without her flock? Curfews for your safety, sweet thing. Looks like you need an escort." Ice flooded my veins. Stories of what happened to unaccompanied women who crossed the wrong wardens flashed through my mind. I stepped back instinctively, my shoulder brushing against the stranger's arm. He didn't step forward. He didn't even change his stance, but he shifted just slightly, placing himself fully between me and the men. "She is with me," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a finality that silenced the alley. The lead warden snorted. "With you? And who the hell are you to—" He choked on his words. His eyes widened, the leer vanishing into sheer, unadulterated panic. His two companions froze, their hands falling from their belt knives as if the metal had burned them. The air grew thick, heavy with a pressure I could feel on my skin, like the charged moment before a summer storm breaks. The stranger hadn't moved a muscle, hadn't raised his voice. He just looked at them. We didn't," the leader stammered, his face pale as milk. "Please, we meant no—" "Leave." The single word was softer than a whisper, yet it rang in the confined space like a bell. They didn't run. They fled, scrambling over each other to disappear into the darkness. I stared at the empty space where they'd stood, my mouth dry. What did you do?" "I reminded them of their duty," he said, turning back to me. His expression was calm, unruffled, as if we'd merely been interrupted by a gust of wind. "Can you walk a little further? We need to be beyond the walls before sunrise." I nodded, numb with a new kind of shock. I followed him, my mind reeling. Who was this man who could scatter armed wardens with a word? This was no simple mercenary, no down-on-his-luck soldier for hire. We reached a small, forgotten postern gate in the city wall. He produced a key from a chain around his neck, the metal old and intricate. The gate swung open silently. Beyond lay the rolling hills, silvered by a rising moon. We walked in silence for what felt like an hour, the city's glow fading behind us. The grass was damp with dew, and my ankle turned painfully on a hidden stone. I cried out, stumbling. He was there before I could fall, his arm around my waist, holding me upright. "Let me see," he said, his voice leaving no room for protest. He guided me to a fallen log and knelt before me, carefully unlacing my boot. His touch was clinical yet gentle as he probed the swelling. "Not broken, but you cannot walk on it." From a small pack he carried, he pulled a length of clean linen and bound my ankle with swift, expert efficiency. The support was immediate and solid. "Better?" I looked down at him, this formidable, mysterious man kneeling in the dirt to tend to my injury. Elias had promised me the stars, but had never bothered to ask if my feet were sore. This stranger asked for nothing but the truth and gave protection without a price. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. His amber eyes met mine, and in the moonlight they seemed to glow softly. A current passed between us, silent and profound. It wasn't attraction, not in the way I understood it. It was recognition. Of what, I did not know. "We rest here," he stated, rising. "The conclave is tomorrow evening. You need sleep." He built a small, efficient fire in a sheltered hollow, then wordlessly offered me his own outer jacket. It was lined with soft leather and carried his scent, pine, cold night air, and something wild, like the wind over distant peaks. I wrapped myself in it, the last of my adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Across the flickering fire, I watched him. He sat perfectly still, watching the darkness beyond our circle of light, listening to sounds I could not hear. He was a man completely at home in the wild night. "Why are you really helping me?" The question escaped before I could stop it. He was silent for so long I thought he would not answer. The fire crackled between us. "Because you asked," he said finally, his gaze still on the darkness. "And because when you asked, you were not looking for a master or a savior. You were looking for a partner in a desperate plan. You saw a person, not just a tool." He looked at me then, and his eyes were solemn. "That is a rare thing. It deserves an answer." Sleep pulled at me, heavy and deep. As I drifted off, wrapped in the scent of him, the last thing I saw was those amber eyes watching over me, glowing like embers in the dark, and I felt, for the first time since leaving my father's house, a fragile, tentative sense of safety.
I woke to the scent of wood smoke and wild mint. Dawn was a pale gray promise on the horizon, and the stranger, my temporary husband, was already moving, dousing the fire with practiced care. My ankle protested as I stood, but the bandage held firm. "We need to discuss what you're walking into," he said, handing me a strip of dried meat and a water skin. His tone was that of a general before a battle. "The Autumn Conclave is not a social gathering, Elara. It is a living map of power, and every person there will be reading you like a chart." "I was raised in court politics," I said, a flicker of defensive pride rising. "I know how to navigate a room." "You know how to navigate a noble room," he corrected, his gaze direct. "This is different. You will be in a hall with alphas. Their politics are not whispered in corners. They are felt in the air. They measure strength in scent, in posture, in the subtle dominance of a glance. Your father plans to trade you to secure pack protection for House Lowell. If you arrive with me, you are making a counter move. They will dissect it." His knowledge was too intimate, too specific. "You speak as if you've sat among them." He ignored my observation again. "When you present a mate at the conclave, you are not introducing a lover. You are declaring an alliance. You are tying your house's fortune to another's strength. By their laws, a mating bond, a true sworn bond, supersedes all prior familial contracts. It is absolute." A cold trickle of understanding seeped through me. A marriage contract can be broken, disputed. A mating bond cannot. "No," he confirmed. "It is permanent, recognized by all packs as inviolable." The pieces were assembling into a terrifying picture. "You're an alpha." It wasn't a question. He held my gaze, his expression unreadable. "Yes." The word settled between us, heavy with implication. I had hired, with a bag of gold, one of the most powerful beings in the realm, a man who could command wardens with a look. And last night, you offered to be my shield, but a marriage contract, even a fake one, wouldn't truly shield me from other alphas, would it? They could challenge it, dismiss it as a human trick. He gave a single, slow nod. They could, and they would. But a mating bond? I trailed off, the enormity of it stealing my breath. "Would be a shield no one would dare test," he finished quietly. "It would make you untouchable. Your house would be under my protection, by the oldest laws we have." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You're suggesting we do that? Form a real, permanent bond for a bag of gold and one night's work?" "I am suggesting you understand your options," he said, his voice low and serious. "A pretend marriage is a flimsy wall. A bond is a fortress. But it is your choice, Elara. Always your choice. I will walk into that hall with you either way." "Why would you offer that?" My voice was barely a whisper. "What could you possibly gain from binding yourself to a stranger?" For the first time, I saw a crack in his composed armor, a flicker of something weary and profound in his amber eyes. "For centuries, I have had alliances offered to me, treaties, bargains, trades. People see the power, the title. They offer their daughters, their soldiers, their gold. They see a throne." He paused, choosing his words with care. "In that alley, you saw a person. You asked me not the alpha, not the king, the man standing there. That," he shook his head, as if the feeling was too foreign to name, "that has value beyond any treaty." "King?" The word echoed in my mind, but I was too caught on the rest.
He was offering me a fortress because I had been desperate enough to ask the man, not the legend. It made no sense, and yet in the quiet of the morning, with his sincere eyes upon me, it felt like the only truth that mattered. I thought of my father's cold calculations, of Elias's fraudulent affection, of a lifetime of being a commodity. This man was offering me a bond, yes, but he was also offering me a choice with the full weight of its consequences. He was not hiding the cost. If I agree, I said, my throat tight, this bond, would it take my will? Could you command me? A look of pure revulsion crossed his features. No, never. A true bond is not a chain. It is a thread, a connection. I would sense your emotions, your distress. You might come to sense mine. It is a tie, not a leash. Your mind, your choices remain your own. That is the essence of it. He meant it. I could see the conviction in him. And after, when the conclave is over and my father is thwarted, then you live your life, he said simply. If you wish to stay, you will have a place. If you wish to go, you will have my protection from afar. The bond remains, but it does not imprison. I turned away, looking out over the hills rolling towards my father's estate, towards the gilded cage I had fled. I could go back now, throw myself on my father's mercy, accept Lord Balthazar, and live a life of quiet, respectable misery, preserving my house's status. Or I could step into the unknown with this mysterious alpha, gain absolute protection at the cost of a permanent magical tie to a man whose name I still didn't know. It was no choice at all. One was a slow death, the other was a terrifying leap into a storm. I faced him, squaring my shoulders. I will not be owned, not by my father, not by a bond, but I will choose my own protection. I will choose the fortress. I took a step towards him. Do it. His eyes widened slightly. Elara, be certain, there is no undoing this. I am certain of nothing, I admitted, a shaky breath leaving me, except that I am tired of being a pawn. You are giving me a chance to be a queen on my own board. So do it, claim me, but know that I am claiming my life in return. For a long moment, he just looked at me, as if memorizing my face in the dawn light. Then he reached out, not for my hand, but to gently cup the side of my neck, his thumb resting over my pulse. His touch was searingly warm. This will be felt, he warned, his voice a low hum. A current shot through me, starting where his skin met mine. It wasn't pain, but power, pure, undiluted, and ancient. It surged through my veins, a river of silver light under my skin. I gasped as it reached my core, settling there with a solid, warm weight. I felt a new presence in my mind, not an intrusion, but an awareness, a steady amber glow of protectiveness, of solemn respect. I could feel his unwavering focus on me. As the light faded, his hand fell away. The connection remained, a hum in my blood, a new chamber in my heart. I stared at him, breathing heavily. It is done, he said, and his voice resonated through our new bond, layered with solemnity. I looked at my arms, where silvery tracery faded like moonlight melting into skin. I felt different, not owned, connected, anchored. I still don't know your name, I whispered, the bond singing between us. A faint, almost sad smile touched his lips. You will. When we walk into that hall, you will know exactly who stands beside you. And for the first time, a thread of real fear, not for my father or the conclave, but for the depth of what I had just done, wound around my heart. I had bonded myself to a storm, and the clouds were gathering on the horizon.
The conclave hall was a monument to raw power. It was not beautiful in the delicate way of my father's estate. It was magnificent in the way a mountain peak or a deep forest was, awe-inspiring and utterly intimidating. Great stone arches rose to a ceiling lost in shadow. Torches burned in iron sconces, their light glinting off the weapons and jewelry of the assembled nobility and pack leaders. The air thrummed with a low, predatory energy, a mix of murmured conversation, tense laughter, and the unspoken challenge of rival alphas sizing each other up. I walked in on his arm, my hand resting lightly over his. I wore a gown of deep emerald, a color my mother had loved. It was simple but elegant, a statement of quiet confidence. His clothes were still dark, unadorned, but they fit him like a second skin, and he moved with a lethally quiet grace that drew eyes. The hum of conversation didn't just die, it was severed. In a wave, heads turned, hundreds of eyes fixed on us. I felt their weight, their instant assessment. I felt the flickers of surprise, curiosity, and sharpening interest through the crowd. But more than that, I felt the reaction of the alphas in the room, a ripple of sudden, acute attention. Postures straightened, chins lifted. It was as if a new frequency had been introduced into the hall, and every one of them had tuned to it. I kept my chin level, my gaze forward, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3. "Elara!" My father's voice cut through the silence, sharp with fury and disbelief. Lord Elara Lowell pushed through the crowd, his face flushed above his formal robes. "What is the meaning of this? Where have you been? And who— What is this?" He gestured violently at the man beside me, his eyes bulging. "Father," I said, and my voice carried, clear and calm, to the edges of the suddenly attentive circle. "I have come as required, to present my chosen mate to the conclave." "Your what?" he spluttered. "You have no mate. I have authorized no contract, no betrothal. This farce ends now." "Lord Eras," a new voice, calm and authoritative, quieted him. From the raised dais at the head of the hall, the high arbitrator, an elderly but sharp-eyed alpha named Theron, regarded us. "Lady Elara, you claim a mating bond outside of prearranged treaty. This requires formal acknowledgement before the assembly. Please, approach." We walked forward, the crowd parting like grass before a scythe. I could feel my father seething behind us, but I didn't look back. My entire world had narrowed to the path to the dais, and the solid, immovable presence of the man beside me. Through our bond, I felt no anxiety, only a deep, profound certainty. It steadied me. We stopped before the dais. High Arbitrator Theron looked down, his gaze missing nothing. "State your name for the conclave record," he said, his words meant for my companion. My father found his voice again, rushing forward. "This is an outrage. She is clearly confused, manipulated. This bond is a sham to avoid her duty to House Lowell. I demand it be dissolved and— Silence!" The word did not come from Theron. It came from the man beside me. It was not shotted. It was a low, resonant command that vibrated in the stone beneath our feet. It wasn't just sound, it was will made manifest. The force of it slammed into my father, not physically, but psychically, driving the breath from his lungs and locking his jaw shut. He stood, paralyzed and wide-eyed, his mouth working soundlessly. Every alpha in the hall went perfectly still. The human nobles simply looked confused, sensing the shift but not understanding. The alphas understood. Their faces transformed from curiosity to shock, then to dawning, awe-struck recognition. The man beside me lifted his gaze to meet Theron, and in that moment he changed. He didn't grow taller, but he seemed to fill the space, his presence expanding to dominate the entire hall. The quiet intensity he'd carried like a cloak fell away, revealing the majestic, terrifying power beneath. "I am Kalen," he said, and his name dropped into the silence like a stone into a still pond. The gasps were sharp, universal. Humans and wolves alike stared. The Alpha King, the reclusive, near-mythical ruler who seldom left his mountain fortress, whose power was the bedrock of our world's stability. He was here, in our hall, and his hand was under mine. Theron, the unflappable high arbitrator, slowly rose from his seat. Then he bowed, not a nod, a deep, formal bow of supreme respect. Around the hall, every alpha followed suit, a wave of deference that left the human nobles gaping. My father looked like a man who had been struck by lightning, all the color drained from his face, leaving a gray, papery mask. His eyes darted from Kaelin's impassive face to mine, filled with a storm of terror and frantic calculation. Kaelin ignored them all, his attention on Theron. The bond between myself and Elara Lowell is true and consummated. It is recognized by moon and blood. House Lowell now rests under my personal protection. This is not a matter for debate or dissolution. It is law. His declaration was absolute, final. But from the side of the hall, a new voice rose, dripping with venomous courtesy. How fortuitous for House Lowell. Lord Balthazar stepped into the open space, his cold flint eyes sweeping over me with disdain, before settling on Kaelin with a challenge he was too arrogant to know was suicidal. And how convenient for a runaway daughter to stumble upon such a powerful protector in her hour of need. The Conclave merely has your word, Your Majesty, for this sudden, unnegotiated bond. Where is the proof beyond a pretty declaration? A dangerous quiet emanated from Kaelin. Through our bond, I felt a surge of cold, regal anger. Before he could respond, commotion erupted at the main doors. The city wardens from the night before, the leader with the broken nose, entered dragging a struggling, well-dressed figure between them. Elias. His eyes, wild with fear, scanned the room and locked on me, then on Kaelin. He blanched, going limp in the warden's grip. "High Arbitrator," the broken-nosed warden said, his voice trembling with reverence as he looked at Kaelin. "We apprehended this man attempting to flee the city under a false name. He matches the description of a confidence trickster preying on noble households, fraudulently promising elopements to extract funds. We have testimonies linking him to attempts on House Lowell, House Vance, and House Greymont." The evidence, delivered so publicly, so perfectly, was devastating. It was the proof I didn't know I needed. It painted my flight not as rebellion, but as escape from a predator my father had, at best, failed to protect me from. Balthazar's sneer faltered. My father found his voice, a desperate, rasping thing. "This changes nothing. She is still my daughter. Her bond, even to a king, requires It requires nothing from you." I spoke. The words left my lips, cool and clear. All eyes swung to me. I let go of Kaelin's arm and took a single step forward, facing my father. The bond hummed with Kaelin's supportive strength, but the voice was mine alone. "You sold my future to the highest bidder. You ignored my mother's wishes for my happiness. You were so blinded by your own ambition that you left me vulnerable to a man like him." I gestured to Elias, who flinched. "You do not get to speak of duty or family now. The only thing that matters is the choice I made, and I chose the man who asked for nothing but my truth and gave me protection without demanding my soul in return." I turned to the assembly, to the sea of shocked, respectful, and calculating faces. The proof of our bond is not in a contract. It is in the fact that I stand here, unafraid, before you all. It is in the fact that the Alpha King saw worth in a desperate woman's choice. House Lowell is under his protection now, and I will be the one to lead it into that future. The silence that followed was profound. Then High Arbitrator Theron struck his staff on the dais. "The bond is witnessed and recognized. Lady Elara Lowell is hereby acknowledged as mate to Alpha King Kaelin. House Lowell's status and holdings are secured under the royal protectorate." It was over. With a few words, my life had been utterly, irrevocably rewritten. I had gone from a runaway to a queen consort in the space of an evening. I looked at Kaelin, my king, my stranger, my shield. His amber eyes met mine, and through the bond I felt it, not triumph, but a deep, resonating pride, in me. The game was just beginning, but I was no longer a piece on the board. I was a player, and I had the most powerful ally in the realm standing beside me. The conclave hall emptied slowly, a river of nobles and alphas flowing around the immovable rock that was Kaelin and me. Congratulations were offered, stiff and formal from some, genuinely awed from others. I accepted them with a numb grace, my mind reeling in the aftermath of the seismic shift. My father was escorted out by two of Theron's aides, his face a stone mask of suppressed fury and shattered ambition. He did not look at me. Lord Balthazar had vanished into the crowd, his poisonous challenge unanswered and forgotten. Elias was dragged away by the wardens, his fate sealed. Justice, it seemed, could move with startling speed when prompted by royal displeasure. Kaelin remained at my side, a silent, powerful presence. He spoke only when necessary, his replies short and definitive. He was letting me stand in the spotlight, letting the assembly see the new queen consort find her footing. It was a deliberate, generous strategy, and I felt his support through the bond, a steady, warm pressure at the edge of my consciousness. Finally, we were alone in a small, quiet antechamber. The weight of the carved stone ceiling pressed down, the silence suddenly deafening after the hall's roar. The enormity of it all crashed over me. My legs trembled. I gripped the back of a heavy chair, my knuckles white. Kaelin was there in an instant, his hand under my elbow. "Breathe, Elara." I did, a shaky, ragged inhale. I declared myself the leader of my house, in front of everyone. I challenged my father. I looked up at him, the fear finally breaking through. I have no idea how to do any of that. I know etiquette and embroidery and which fork to use with fish. I don't know land management or dispute resolution or how to command loyalty from stewards who've served my father for decades. "You know people," he said, his voice calm. "You know how to listen. You know what it is to be undervalued and manipulated. That is a better foundation than any ledger book." He guided me to sit. "You will not be doing it alone. You have the authority of the crown behind you, and you have me." "Why?" The question burst from me again, more plea than inquiry. "Why are you doing this, truly? It cannot just be because I asked nicely in an alley." He crouched before me, bringing us to eye level. In the quiet room, he seemed less the mythic king and more the man from the campsite. "For a very long time," he began, choosing his words with care, "my world has been one of duty, obligation, and the relentless calculus of power. People see the crown, the title, the alpha king. They offer alliances, they posture, they scheme. They want something from the position." His amber eyes held mine. "You, Elara Lowell, crashed into me and asked something of the man. You offered everything you had, not as a bribe, but as honest payment for a service. You were terrified, heartbroken, but you were not broken. You were still fighting. You chose to trust a stranger over the certain misery your path offered. That kind of courage, it is a rare and precious thing. It reminded me of what true strength looks like, not just the strength to dominate, but the strength to hope, to risk, to choose." He took my hand, his thumb brushing over the spot where the silvery bond mark had appeared. "I am helping you because in helping you claim your own life, you have given me a glimpse of mine again, not as a king, but as a man who can make a difference for one person. That matters." Tears welled in my eyes, hot and unexpected. They were not tears of fear or self-pity, but of a profound, soul-deep relief. For the first time in my life, someone saw my value not in what I could bring them, but in who I was at my core, flawed, desperate, but still choosing. "What happens now?" I whispered. "Now," he said, standing and offering his hand again, "we go to the royal quarters. You rest. Tomorrow we begin. We will meet with your house stewards. We will review the Lowell holdings. You will learn, and I will be beside you, one step at a time." The royal quarters were not in the city, but in a secluded, fortified manor house in the hills overlooking it. It felt like a place of peace, of strategy, not just display. A dignified older woman, introduced as Mara, the head of household, greeted me not with the obsequiousness of a servant facing royalty, but with a kind, assessing warmth. "Your chambers are ready, my lady. We've taken the liberty of having a few things made up in your size. His Majesty said you traveled light." My chambers were a suite of rooms, a sitting room with books and a fireplace, a bedroom with a canopy bed draped in silver and green, and a bathing room with a deep copper tub. It was both luxurious and comfortable. A simple nightdress and robe lay on the bed. They were soft, beautiful, and mine. Later, washed and changed, I stood on the balcony of my room. The moon was high, the same moon that had witnessed my flight and my bonding. I could feel Kaylin's presence in the suite adjacent to mine, a steady, calming pulse through our connection. A soft knock came at the connecting door. It opened before I could answer, and he stood there, having changed into simpler dark trousers and a linen shirt. He looked more approachable, yet no less regal. "I thought you might have questions about the bond, about what you feel." I nodded, wrapping the robe tighter around me. "It's like a warmth in my chest, and a sense of where you are, not specifically, just that you're there, safe." "It will deepen with time," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You may catch flashes of my stronger emotions. I will likely sense your distress or joy more keenly. It is a channel for empathy, not control." "And the others? The alphas today, they felt you before you even spoke." "All alphas project a sense of their power, their signature. Mine is pronounced. They recognized it. To them, our bond is not just a political fact, it is a tangible energy in the room. That is why Balthazar's challenge was so foolish. He was questioning not just my word, but a truth they could all feel in the air. It was a lot to absorb, a world where power had a scent, a taste, a pressure. "Will I change?" I asked, the fear creeping back. "Because I'm bonded to you?" He shook his head. "You are human, Elara. The bond does not alter your nature, it simply ties your spirit to mine. Your strength will remain your own. Your humanity is not a flaw, it is your perspective, and it is needed." He pushed away from the doorframe. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is a new day, your day." He left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood on the balcony for a long time looking at the stars. The cage was gone. In its place was a vast, terrifying, and exhilarating frontier. I was bonded to a king. I was the head of my house. I had responsibilities I couldn't yet fathom. But for the first time, I also had an anchor, not a chain, but a tether to something solid and true. I was not alone. I touched the place over my heart where the bond hummed softly. "One step at a time," I whispered to the night, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt not dread, but a flicker of hope. The morning sun streamed into a bright, airy study that smelled of old paper and beeswax. A large oak table was spread with maps, ledgers, and sealed scrolls. My father's stewards, 3 stern-faced men, stood on one side of it, looking deeply uncomfortable. On the other side stood Kaylin, a silent, imposing pillar of support, and Mara, who gave me an encouraging nod. This was my first test, not before a court, but before the men who knew the actual granular truth of House Lowell's fortunes. "My lady," began the eldest, Master Adlar, with a stiff bow, "we have, as requested, compiled the current accounts, tenant rolls, and active contracts of House Lowell. His Majesty's secretaries have verified the summaries." He pushed a heavy ledger toward me. The pages were filled with dense columns of figures. My stomach clenched. Numbers had never been my stronghold. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I looked at the 3 men. "Master Adlar, Master Gorin, Master Pelor, you have served my father and my grandfather before him with loyalty. For that you have my thanks. I know this transition is unexpected." They exchanged glances, surprised by the acknowledgement. "I will be honest," I continued, placing my hands flat on the table. "I do not yet have your expertise. I do not know each tenant's name or the yield of the South Fields. What I do know is that House Lowell's greatest asset is not just its land or its gold, but the people who live and work on it. My father's focus was on leveraging that asset for greater status. Mine will be on ensuring its health and fairness. I opened the ledger, my eyes scanning the lines, not for the totals, but for the patterns. I pointed to a column. These fees for the millwrights in the Riverside holding, they were increased by 30% 2 years ago, yes? Master Gorin blinked. Yes, my lady, a standard adjustment for increased yield. Standard for whom? I asked gently. Did the miller's incomes increase by 30% to match, or did it simply deepen their debt to our house? Silence. I turned to another page. And here, the lease for the Greystone farm. It lists the tenant as J. Smith. My father's notes from last season's visit, which I found in his desk, mention that Jacob Smith's son fell ill and the harvest was poor, yet the full rent is marked as collected. Master Pelor cleared his throat. The contract is the contract, my lady. We cannot make exceptions for misfortune, or every tenant would have a tale of woe. We can, Kalen's voice rumbled softly from behind me. If the lady of the house wishes to show mercy and secure long-term loyalty over short-term gain, that is her prerogative. Indeed, it is the mark of wise leadership. I felt a surge of gratitude through our bond. He was backing my instinct without taking over. I looked at the stewards. I am not my father. I will not rule from a distance through fear of the contract. I wish to rule with the knowledge that a prosperous, loyal tenantry is the true foundation of a house's strength. I want to review every fee increase from the last 5 years. I want to meet with the millers and the farmers. I want to understand where the burdens are too heavy. I closed the ledger. Your jobs are not in jeopardy. Your knowledge is invaluable to me, but your mandate is changing. From today, we measure success not just in gold deposited, but in roofs repaired, in disputes settled fairly, in children fed. Are you with me? The stewards stared at me. The defiance and skepticism in their eyes slowly melted into something else. Curiosity, a flicker of respect, and perhaps a shred of relief. Master Adlar was the first to bow, deeper this time. It will be a different way, my lady, but we are servants of House Lowell. If this is your will, we will help you see it done. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. As they left to compile the lists I'd requested, I sank into a chair, my energy spent. Kalen came to stand beside me. You were magnificent. I was terrified, I admitted with a weak laugh. All good leaders are, he said. It means you understand the weight of your decisions. You saw the people behind the numbers, Elara. That is a gift no ledger can teach. Over the next few days, we worked. I met with secretaries, with lawyers, with the captains of the House Guard. Kalen was always nearby, a quiet source of strength. He answered my questions, offered counsel when I asked, but he never commanded. He was teaching me to rule by letting me rule. One afternoon, as we reviewed a particularly thorny border dispute with a neighboring lord, I felt a sharp spike of frustration through the bond. Not mine, but his. I looked up from the map. What is it? He was standing by the window, his gaze distant. A matter from the northern reach. One of my regional alphas is testing the boundaries of a treaty. It requires my personal attention. A cold knot formed in my stomach. You're leaving. He turned to me. For a short time, a week perhaps. The realm does not run itself, and my presence here, while important, has been a distraction from other duties. Panic, childish and sharp, rose in my throat. I had come to rely on his steady presence, on the anchor of the bond. The thought of being here, in this new role, without him. He crossed the room and took my hands. Listen to me. You are ready for this. The stewards respect you. Mara adores you. The house is secure. This is your domain now. You do not need me standing behind you to legitimize your rule. The bond does that. Your own actions these past days have done that. But what if I make a mistake? What if they challenge me? Then you will handle it, he said firmly, with the same courage and intelligence you have shown. You are not a porcelain queen, Elara. You are steel. You just haven't fully realized it yet. He squeezed my hands. And you are never truly alone. I will be with you here. He touched his chest, over his heart, mirroring where I felt the bond. His certainty was a cloak he wrapped me around. I took a deep breath and nodded. A week or two. A week or two, he confirmed. Use the time. Make this house yours. I will return to see what the Lady of Lowell has built. His departure the next morning was a quiet affair. He clasped my shoulder, his amber eyes holding a message too complex for words. Pride, trust, encouragement. Then he mounted his great black horse and rode out with a small contingent of his guards. The silence he left behind was deafening. The manor felt vast and empty. I stood on the steps, clutching my robe around me, the bond a faint, steady hum in the distance. Mara appeared at my elbow. He'll be back, my lady. In the meantime, we've much to do. The tenants from the Westwood are here to see you about the spring planting. Shall we begin? I looked from the empty road to Mara's expectant face. The anchor was gone, but the foundation he had helped me build remained. I squared my shoulders. Yes, Mara, I said, my voice finding its strength.
The first day without Kaelin was a blur of determined activity. I met with the Westwood tenants, listened to their concerns about blight in the apple orchards, and authorized funds for a naturalist from the city to assess the soil. I signed papers, reviewed menus with Mara, and walked the manor grounds. I kept moving, afraid the silence would catch up with me. The bond was a curious comfort. It was like a thread of golden light stretching into the north. I could feel his general state, focused, purposeful, a little weary. It didn't tell me what he was doing, but it told me he was alive. He was him, and that was enough. On the third day, the test came. My father arrived. He was not admitted to the main house. Mara, with a protective ferocity that surprised me, had him shown into the formal receiving room near the entrance. I walked in, my back straight, wearing one of the new gowns that spoke of my status, elegant but severe in cut and color. Lord Elara Lowell looked older. The furious bluster from the conclave was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating exhaustion. He did not rise from his chair. "Daughter," he said, the word a weapon. "Father," I replied, taking the seat across from him. "To what do I owe this visit?" "I come to discuss the future of my house," he said, his eyes scanning the room, noting the changes, the subtle signs of my occupancy. "You have played a clever, reckless game. You have secured protection, but you are a child playing at stewardship. These lands, these people, they need a firm, experienced hand, not the whims of a girl smitten with a fairy tale." The old barbs, designed to make me feel small and foolish, but they landed differently now. I felt a flicker of anger, but beneath it the steady warmth of the bond. Kaelin's belief in me was a shield. "The whims you speak of," I said, my voice cool, "include renegotiating unfair mill fees and providing relief to a sick tenant. They include ensuring the people who make House Lowell function can actually feed their families. Are these the actions of a foolish girl or of a responsible leader?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Sentiment. It will bankrupt you within a season. The other houses will see it as weakness. They will begin to circle to make claims on our borders, our trade. They will see a house under the direct protection of the Alpha King," I countered. "Any challenge to our borders is a challenge to him. I believe the message at the conclave was quite clear on that point." His jaw tightened. "He is not here, is he? Called away to more important matters, no doubt, leaving his little queen to fend for herself. How long do you think his fascination will last?"
There it was, the real thrust of his attack, to isolate me, to make me feel abandoned and vulnerable. My bond with the king is not a fascination, it is a covenant, and my rule here is not a temporary amusement, it is my responsibility. You had your chance to lead this house, father. You led it to the brink of being sold off piece by piece for a title you couldn't earn on your own merit. Now it is my turn. He stood now too, his face mottled with rage. You ungrateful wretch, everything I did was to secure our legacy. Your legacy, I shot back, the dam breaking. Not mine, not my mother's. She wanted a home filled with love, not a ledger filled with debts of honor. You sold her dreams, and you tried to sell me. Well, I set my own price, and I am worth far more than you ever imagined. We stood facing each other, breathing heavily. The ghost of my mother hung between us. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not remorse, but a stark, shocking realization that he had lost, truly lost. The old barter he had considered a tool had become an adversary he could not control, protected by a power he could never challenge. Get out, I said, the command quiet but absolute. You are not welcome here. Your pension will be paid, as is your due, but you will not interfere in the affairs of House Lowell again. If you do, I will not need the king to enforce my will. I will have you removed from the territory by my own guard. Do you understand? He said nothing. He just looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Then, with a last contemptuous glance, he walked out, and then he walked. I didn't collapse until the door shut behind him. I sank back into the chair, trembling. I had faced him down, alone, and I had won. Through the bond, I sent a pulse of feeling, not fear or a call for help, but a wave of fierce, triumphant vindication. A moment later, I felt a surge in return, a powerful, warm rush of pride and approval that flooded my senses, so strong it brought fresh tears to my eyes. He was far away, but he was with me. He had felt my victory. Mara slipped into the room, a tray with tea in her hands. I took the liberty, my lady. Well done. I accepted the cup, my hands steady now. It was only the beginning, Mara. Yes, but what a beginning. The days that followed were transformative. With the ghost of my father's influence banished, the house truly began to feel like mine. I made decisions, some small, some significant. I approved a new roof for the village school. I settled a long-standing border squabble between two farmers with a compromise that left both feeling heard. I began to learn the names, not just of the tenants, but of their children, their worries, their hopes. The bond remained my constant companion. At night, I would lie in bed and focus on that golden thread, feeling Kalen's steady, enduring presence. Sometimes I would catch a wisp of his emotion, a flash of irritation during a tense negotiation, a moment of satisfaction when a problem was solved. It was intimate in a way I'd never known, a silent sharing of burdens and triumphs. I was not just waiting for him to return, I was building something to show him. I was becoming Elara, Lady of Lowell in truth as well as in title. And the strange, wonderful truth was I was starting to like her.
He returned on the evening of the 10th day. I was in the study, reviewing plans for a new irrigation channel, when I felt it. The bond, which had been a steady hum in the distance, suddenly flared to vivid, immediate life. It was like the sun had risen inside my chest. My head snapped up. A moment later, I heard the commotion in the courtyard. Hooves on stone, the greeting of guards. Mara's voice raised in welcome. My heart hammered against my ribs. I smoothed my dress, tucking a stray hair behind my ear, suddenly nervous. Would he see the changes? Would I measure up to whatever expectations he'd had? I forced myself to walk, not run, to the main hall. The great doors were open, and a last of the sunset painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple. He stood in the doorway, backlit, dust from the road on his boots and cloak. He was speaking quietly to his captain, but as I appeared at the top of the stairs, he turned. Our eyes met across the hall.
the noise around us faded. He looked tired, but his amber eyes were clear, and they held an intensity that stole my breath. He took me in, a slow, deliberate sweep from head to toe, and a wave of profound appreciation and something deeper, warmer, flowed through the bond. It wasn't about the dress or my appearance, it was the sight of me, standing confidently in the home I was making my own. He dismissed his captain with a nod and walked toward me. I descended the stairs to meet him. "Welcome home," I said, the simple words feeling monumental. "Elara," he said, my name a sigh of relief on his lips. He didn't embrace me, but he reached out and took my hand, lifting it. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, a gesture of connection that sent a shiver up my arm. "You are well." It wasn't a question. He could feel I was well through the bond, but he wanted to hear it. "I am," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips. "The house is well. We missed you, but we managed." "Mara tells me you faced down a wolf at the gate," he said, a hint of a smile in his eyes, "and sent him packing with his tail between his legs." So he'd already been briefed. It was necessary. It was exceptional. He still held my hand. "Walk with me. Tell me everything." We walked in the twilight garden, and I talked. I told him about the mill fees, the sick tenant, the school roof, the border dispute. The words poured out of me, animated, passionate. I showed him the plans for the irrigation channel. He listened intently, asking sharp, insightful questions that showed he understood the complexities. "You've not just held the ground, Elara," he said, finally, stopping by a fountain that sparkled in the moonlight. "You've improved it. You've planted seeds that will grow long after we are both gone. That is the mark of a true ruler." The praise, coming from him, warmed me more than the sun ever could. I had a good teacher, and a powerful reminder that I was not alone. He was silent for a moment, looking at our joined hands. The bond between us thrummed with a new, more complex harmony. The initial protectiveness and solemn respect were still there, but woven through them now a rich thread of admiration, of pride, of affection. "The matter in the north, it is resolved?" "It is," he said, his expression turning grim. "A lesson was required and delivered. The treaties stand." He looked at me. "But being away, it clarified things." "What things?" He turned to fully face me, his other hand coming up to cradle the side of my face. His touch was electric. "This bond was meant to be your shield, a practical solution to an impossible problem, but it has become more for me." His thumb stroked my cheek. "I have spent my life surrounded by people, yet feeling utterly solitary. The bond with you, it is not a chain, Elara. It is the first real conversation my soul has had in centuries. Feeling your strength, your courage, your compassion from afar, it was not a distraction from my duty. It was the reason to fulfill it swiftly, so I could return to you." My breath caught. The raw honesty in his words, in his eyes, mirrored the truth singing through our connection. This was no longer just a pact, it was becoming the foundation of something real. "I felt the same," I confessed, my voice trembling. "When you were gone, the bond was my compass. Knowing you were there, believing in me, it gave me the courage to become who I needed to be. Not just a protected woman, but a partner." The word hung between us. Partner. His eyes glowed with that inner light. "Then let us be partners, in truth, not just in bond, but in life. This," he gestured between us, "to the house, to the lands beyond. This can be our legacy, not mine imposed upon you, or yours grafted onto mine. Something new, built together." It was a proposal deeper than any marriage contract. It was an invitation to share a throne, a life, a purpose. Tears of joy bright and silent, spilled down my cheeks. I leaned into his touch. "Yes," I whispered, "together." He didn't kiss me. The moment was too sacred for that. Instead, he leaned his forehead against mine, a gesture of profound unity. We stood there, under the rising moon, two solitary souls who had found a home in the most unexpected of places, in a bond forged from desperation and flowering now into chosen, mutual respect and a love that was as deep as it was unexpected. The stranger from the alley was gone. In his place was my king, my shield, my partner, and I was no longer a runaway heiress. I was his queen in every way that mattered. Life did not become a fairy tale. It became something better, a shared purpose. With Kalen's return, our dynamic shifted into a seamless collaboration. Mornings were spent in the study, side by side. He handled the broader matters of the realm, diplomatic correspondence, military deployments, the intricate balance of power among the regional alphas. I managed the Lowell holdings and, increasingly, began to advise him on matters concerning human settlements and trade. My perspective was new to him. Where he saw packs and territories, I saw people, supply lines, and economies. Together, we drafted a new charter for fair trade between the pack lands and the human cities, one that protected resources but encouraged exchange. It was my first foray into royal policy, and he treated my ideas with serious consideration, debating, refining, and ultimately supporting them. "You have a gift for seeing the whole board," he told me one afternoon, after a successful negotiation with a merchant consortium. "Not just the pieces you identify with. That is the essence of kingship, or queenship." The word queenship sent a thrill through me. It was an acknowledgement of my evolving role, not just as his mate, but as a co-ruler in the making. A moon cycle after his return, the regional alphas arrived for their formal audience. It was the first time I would stand beside Kalen, not as a shocking revelation, but as an established fact. Nerves fluttered in my stomach as I dressed in a gown of silver gray, the color of mist and steel. My hair was woven into a complex crown of braids, simple but regal. "They will test you," Kalen said, straightening his own formal jacket in the mirror of my chamber. "Not openly, with questions, with subtle challenges. They are predators assessing a new element in the pride." "I know," I said, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "Let them." The hall was set for a formal council, not a feast. The alphas, 7 of them, representing the vast territories of the realm, were already seated at a semicircular table when we entered. They rose as one, bowing their heads to Kalen. Their eyes, however, slid to me, sharp and assessing. We took our seats at the head of the table. Kalen did not speak first. He looked at me, a silent delegation. I took a steadying breath. "My lords," I began, my voice clear in the stone hall. "Welcome. His Majesty has kept me apprised of the state of the realm. Today, I wish to hear from you, not just of challenges between packs, but of challenges for your people, human and wolf-kind alike. A strong realm is built from the ground up, on full bellies, safe roads, and just laws. Tell me where the ground is shaky." There was a moment of stunned silence. This was not the usual agenda. Alpha Marcus, a bear of a man from the eastern marches, was the first to lean forward, a skeptical frown on his face. "With respect, my lady, the concerns of human farmers are not pack business." "Aren't they?" I asked mildly. "If the farmers in the river valley cannot get their grain to market because the roads are plagued by bandits, your pack's tithe of that grain suffers. If sickness spreads through a mining town because the wells are foul, the flow of iron for your weapons slows. Their stability is your stability." Another alpha, a sharp-faced woman named Lyra from the southern coasts, watched me with keen interest. "You speak of integration, a noble ideal, but our ways are different. Wolf law and human law have coexisted by staying separate." "Coexistence is not synergy," I replied, feeling Kalen's supportive energy beside me. "I am not suggesting we erase differences. I am suggesting we build bridges where our interests align."
His Majesty and I are drafting a trade charter that recognizes pack sovereignty while creating protected trade corridors. It would increase prosperity for all. I would value your insights." I was not commanding, I was inviting. I was treating them as the experts of their own domains while introducing a new interconnected vision. The debate that followed was fierce, but it was a debate, not a challenge to my presence. I listened, I asked questions, I conceded points where they were valid, and held firm where I saw the greater good. Kalen spoke only occasionally, usually to clarify a point of law or to lend his absolute authority to a direction we had agreed upon. He was showcasing me, letting them see a mind at work. By the end of the long afternoon, we had not solved all the realm's problems, but we had a draft of the trade charter with notes from each alpha and a commitment to meet again. More importantly, I had their measured, grudging respect. They saw I was not a decorative consort, but a woman with a brain and a vision that complemented their king's. After they had departed, Kalen and I returned to our private sitting room. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to me. "You were," he said, a proud smile finally breaking through his formal demeanor, "absolutely brilliant. You turned a council of wary wolves into a working group. You didn't dominate, you facilitated. That is a power I do not possess." I sipped the wine, the warmth spreading through me. I just spoke from what I know, from what I've seen these last weeks on my own lands. "That is exactly it," he said, sitting beside me. "You bring the reality of the realm to the table, not just the theory of power. They need to see that. I need to see that." He took my hand. "The coronation is in a month. It was always a formality to seal your status, but now I want it to be a proclamation, not just of you as my queen, but of a new era, a partnership. The official coronation." The thought was daunting, but the look in his eyes made it feel like a triumph waiting to happen. "Together," I said, echoing our promise. "Always," he vowed, and the bond between us swelled with a certainty that felt as solid as the mountains themselves. We were no longer just 2 people bound by circumstance. We were architects of a future, and we had just laid the first stone. The day of the coronation dawned clear and bright. The ceremony was to be held in the ancient stone circle at the heart of the royal forest, a place of primal power, where the kings and queens of the realm had been crowned for 1,000 years. I was dressed not by maids, but by Mara and Lyra, the southern alpha, who had offered the service as a mark of respect. The gown was not of my house colors, nor of Kalen's traditional black and gold. It was a dawn-colored silk, the color of new beginnings, embroidered with silver threads that formed intertwining patterns of vines and wolves. It was a symbol of unity. Lyra fastened a final clasp at my shoulder. "You have changed the air in the room, girl," she said, her voice gruff but not unkind. "It remains to be seen if it's a change for the better, but you have earned the chance to prove it. That is more than most get." It was the closest thing to a blessing I would get from her, and I treasured it. Kalen met me at the edge of the forest. He was in full formal regalia, black and gold, a cloak of obsidian fur on his shoulders. But his eyes, when they saw me, held only warmth. He offered me his arm. "Ready?" I took it, the bond a brilliant, singing chord between us. "Ready." We walked together through the forest path, emerging into the vast, sun-drenched stone circle. It was filled with people, alphas, nobles, pack members, and commoners from the local villages who had been invited. There were no walls here, no barriers. The sky was our ceiling. High Arbiter Theron stood in the center, before the tallest stone. The ceremony was simple, ancient. Theron spoke of the weight of the crown, the duty to the land and the people, the covenant between ruler and realm. He asked Kalen the traditional vows of strength, justice, and protection. Then he turned to me. "Elara of House Lowell, you come before this assembly not by birthright to this throne, but by choice, by bond, by the courage to seek a new path and the strength to walk it.
Do you vow to use your voice, your heart, and your mind for the betterment of all peoples of this realm, to stand not behind your king, but beside him as partner and counsel, to honor the bond that ties you to this land and its ruler with all the responsibility it entails? The words were new. They were not the traditional vows of a consort. They were Kaelin's doing. My eyes filled with tears as I understood the magnitude of what he had orchestrated. This was his public vow to me as much as mine to the realm. My voice rang out, clear and sure. I so vow. Farron lifted the queen's crown. It was not a heavy, gem-encrusted diadem. It was a delicate circlet of intertwined silver and pale gold, set with a single luminous moonstone. It was a crown meant to be worn, not just borne. Kaelin took it from Theron. Then, in a move that sent a ripple of awe through the crowd, he turned to me. He did not place it on my head. He held it out to me, an offering. You told me once you would not be owned. You told me you would choose. So choose. Take your place. Not because I div it, but because you have earned it. A profound silence held the circle. With trembling hands, but a heart steady as stone, I took the crown from his hands. It was light, yet it held the weight of every hope, every struggle, every choice that had led me here. I lifted it and placed it firmly upon my own head. The cheer that erupted was not from nobles alone. It was a roar from the pack members, a glad cry from the commoners, a unified shout of acceptance that shook the leaves from the trees. I had not been given a title, I had claimed a role. Kaelin's smile was brighter than the sun. He took my hand and turned us to face the people, our people. Later, after the feasting and the dancing, we stole away to the balcony of our forest lodge. The moon was full, bathing the world in silver, just as it had been on the night I ran, on the night we bonded. I leaned against the railing, the cool metal of the circlet a pleasant weight on my brow. It's done. It's begun, he corrected gently, coming to stand beside me. He looked at me, his amber eyes soft. Do you remember what you said to me in the dirt by a campfire the morning after we met? You said you were choosing protection, but you were afraid it was just another cage. I remember. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of the crown on my forehead. Look at what your choice built, Elara. Not a cage, a kingdom, a partnership, a future. You chose a shield, and in doing so, you forged a crown. I turned into his touch, the bond between us a symphony of contentment, love, and fierce shared purpose. I didn't need a husband by tomorrow. I needed an equal. I needed you. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close under the witness of the moon. And I, he murmured into my hair, his voice thick with emotion, needed someone to remind me that the greatest strength is not in ruling alone, but in having someone to rule for. You are my heart, Elara, my queen, my choice. We stood there, the king and the queen who had found each other in a collision of desperation and honor. The path ahead would be long, with challenges and joys we couldn't yet imagine, but we would face them as we had faced everything since that fateful night, together, not as a king and his consort, but as partners, bound by choice, crowned by destiny, and building a legacy not of fear and obligation, but of hope and chosen love. And as the moon shone down on the quiet forest, I knew with absolute certainty the best choice I ever made was not running away from my old life. It was running straight into the arms of a stranger and finding my future.